In the last few sessions, we have understood the language C# fundamentals, which can be considered as the prerequisite to get started with our ASP.NET sessions, because the language which we will be using at the code behind will be C# language. Hope by this time you are clear with the C# fundamentals and the language syntax and terminology too. Now, in this session, let us try to understand why do we need to learn ASP.NET by observing the various features that are supported by ASP.NET. In this process, we will also understand what are the features that has been added to ASP.NET version wise. But before we start with ASP.NET, let us understand why do we need a technology like ASP.NET. So to understand that, let us first understand how the internet technology works. Whenever we talk about internet technology, then we need to understand two terms. One is the client, where the client is nothing but the web browser like Chrome, Firefox or Internet Explorer, etc., from where you will be sending a request to the server. And the second term we need to understand is the web server. So what is a web server means? In simple terms, we can consider that a web server is a server software or hardware dedicated to satisfy the client requests on the World Wide Web, popularly called as WWW. So the web server is the one which will maintain your web application. Whenever a client sends a request for some web content like HTML or an image, then a request from the client will be given to the web server as a HTTP request, and once the web server accepts the request, if the requested content is present within the web server, then that content will be provided as a HTTP response to the client, where HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And this protocol is a connection-oriented and a stateless protocol. So, why do we call this protocol as a connection-oriented and stateless protocol? Means whenever we send a request, then we know that the server will accept the request, and once the processing is done, we know that the web server will provide the response back to the client also, right? Till that time, the connectivity between the client and the web server will be maintained, and hence we call it as a connection oriented. And once the response is provided back to the client, the web server will no more maintain the details about the client, and hence we call it as a stateless protocol. It means that every time we send a request from the client, always a new request will be sent to the web server. And please do remember here, client means browser. Now, whenever a client sends a request to the web server requesting some external resources such as a flat file, database or some other network, then the web server will not be in a position to interact with the external resources on its own. Now, let us understand some important observations from the above image. Whenever the client sends a request to the server, then the request will be given as a HTTP request, and once the server completes the processing, the response will be provided as a HTTP response. Whenever the client sends a request for any external resources, then the web server can't handle the request on its own. Because of the above reason, we have a requirement, that is, we need a technology to interact with the external resources and to provide the response back to the client. Solution for the above requirement will be server-side technology. And we have many server-side technologies available, and the various server-side technologies are CGI, which stands for Common Gateway Interface, ASP stands for Active Server Pages, JSP stands for Java Server Pages, PSP stands for PL SQL Server Pages, PHP, initially when it was introduced, we used to call it as personal homepage, and these days it is popularly called as hypertext preprocessor. Cold Fusion, ASP.NET, the technology what we are interested to learn now, and Ruby on Rails, etc. Many times students do ask me a question about PSP. We learnt Oracle and also PL SQL, but we never came across the term PSP. So for them, just remember, PSP or PL SQL server pages are an extension for PL SQL Web Toolkit, which allows PL SQL to be used as a scripting language within HTML files. Okay, but our requirement is not to dig deep into PSP, right? So let me stop the discussion here itself, and let us continue with our topic of the day. Now, my question is, the requirement is only one. That is, we need a technology to interact with the external resources and to provide the response back to the client. But what we have is many solutions, and one among them is ASP.NET MVC also, right? And please to remember that ASP.NET and ASP.NET MVC are two different web technologies which are provided by Microsoft for developing the web applications. Now, when we have one requirement and if there is only one solution, then happily we will be using that as a solution, right? But here the case is different. We have one requirement and we have many solutions. So what is your reason for selecting ASP.NET as the technology for developing the web applications? In simple non-technical terms, if I want to specify, if you are interested in buying a car or a TV, then what shall we do? Usually, we will check out all the features of the product. If we like those features, then we will be buying that product, right? So, in the same fashion, let us observe the features of ASP.NET and let us come to a conclusion. Do we need to select this as our technology for developing web applications? Okay, let us get started. ASP.NET stands for Active Server Pages for .NET, and usually we consider it as a specification which is used to develop web applications and services. Since it is a specification, it has to be implemented with the support of a language such as C# or VB.NET, etc. Now, let us start understanding the features of ASP.NET. I shall list out the features from 1.x version and let us observe how this technology has been shaped to our latest 4.5, the current version. One important point I wanted to mention now is I will be listing out just the features in this session. Understanding all these features will be our entire mastering ASP.NET 4.5 with C# courses all about. Okay, so let us start with features of ASP.NET 1.x. Side-by-side execution, which means that when ASP.NET was newly introduced, ASP was already popular. Thousands of applications are developed in ASP and also getting developed in ASP. Since ASP.NET was newly introduced and also very powerful, people wanted to start with ASP.NET. Since many applications are started, they provided a provision to have both ASP and ASP.NET pages within the single application, so that gradually if they want, they can replace the ASP pages with ASP.NET pages. Server-side controls are introduced to provide the user interface. This was one of the best features which has been introduced in ASP.NET 1.x, so that instead of using HTML for the UI creation, we can use the new server-side controls introduced by ASP.NET. What is the advantage we get means, since HTML is a browser dependent, to support all the web browsers, we need to handle it properly. Whereas whenever we use ASP.NET server-side controls for the UI creation, then these controls have a capability to identify the client's browser and they will render the relevant HTML code accordingly. Validation controls are introduced to provide the validations on the web forms. Earlier, if we need to perform some validations, such as if the user has provided a value for a control or not, if the provided value for a control is matching with the value provided in another control or not, if the provided value is given in a proper pattern or not. To perform all these validations, we need to use JavaScript. But now with the support of validation controls, we can handle these validations in a very simple way. So you don't have to really know JavaScript for performing the validations. ADO.NET, which stands for ActiveX Data Objects for .NET, is used to interact with the database. Globalization and localization has been introduced, popularly called as internationalization also, which means that now you can develop a web application to support multiple languages and cultures. Tracing features are introduced in order to trace the flow of the application. ASP.NET supports different types of tracing methods. One is page level tracing, second one is application level tracing. Server-side caching methods are introduced to improvise the performance of an application. And ASP.NET supports various caching methods such as page output caching, page fragmentation caching, substitution cache, etc. New security features has been introduced such as forms authentication, Windows authentication, passport authentication. Mobile.NET has been introduced to develop device-independent applications. Using this feature, if we develop an application, then if we send a request from the computer, the response will be given in the format what a computer can understand. Whenever we send a request from the mobile phone, the response will be in the format what a mobile can understand. ASP.NET Web Services has been introduced to implement service-oriented architecture. Web Setup project is introduced to deploy the application. Remember that 1.0 version is first released in 2002 and then 1.1 version got released later in 2003. So let me specify the initial year itself, that is 2002. Before that also we had ASP.NET in alpha and beta versions. Hi friends, hope you are enjoying my videos. If you like my video, please subscribe my channel and click on the bell icon to get the notifications of all my latest videos. Friends, many students are asking me where can we find your courses and how to get my courses for the best price. Friends, if you are already a Pluralsight subscriber and wanted to upgrade your skills towards Java stacks such as JDBC, Servlets, JSP and Spring MVC with Hibernate through my courses, please check out the links present at the description on this video. Many students are requesting me to provide trainings on various technologies, which I couldn't able to fulfill all these days. Now, here is the good news. You can learn from me at the most affordable price, $5 to $10 for each course, which means now you can upgrade your skills to the latest technologies at the price lesser than watching a movie. You can find my courses at Udemy and also in our website technoacademy.net. The best price of my course at Udemy you can find using the link provided at the description of this video. And also you can find the price I'm offering at my website technoacademy.net. Wherever the price you feel lesser, subscribe my course from that website. Happy programming, yours Shekhar. Next, let us understand the new features introduced in ASP.NET 2 and it has been released in 2005. 54 new server-side controls are introduced. Validation controls can be grouped together. In ASP.NET 1.x, we can use validation controls to perform the validations, but we cannot group them together. So if we wanted to design both login and registration on the same page, and if we wanted to perform the validations for both login and registration in ASP.NET 2, it can be easily done with the support of validation controls grouping. When we used to work with ASP.NET 1.x, it supports both C# and also VB. But in between, if you wanted to interchange the languages, it will be a problem. But from ASP.NET 2, we have multi-language support has been introduced, which means that from ASP.NET 2, we can have one page designed in VB.NET and the other page in C# also. Cross-page submission method is introduced. Whenever we used to work with ASP.NET 1.x, we need to submit the data to the same page, and from there we need to perform the navigations. But from ASP.NET 2, we have been provided with the feature called as cross-page submission, which allows the user to submit the data from one page to the other page. But all these features are just minor updates. But the most important features that got introduced in ASP.NET 2 are master pages to provide the templates for the website. We shall learn in detail about this feature later in our course. The next feature which has been introduced in ASP.NET 2 is themes and skins are introduced to build the styles for the application. Along with these features, we have a new feature called as profiles are introduced to maintain the user data permanently. These days, if you observe many websites, the term profiles has become very common, right? Next, we have web parts, which are introduced to personalize the web forms present within the website. Web parts are very powerful feature which was already available in a product called as SharePoint. That feature has been added to ASP.NET so that we can customize our web form dynamically at runtime. New ADO.NET controls are introduced such as SQL data source, object data source, XML data source, etc. Server-side caching has been enhanced using substitution caching. I think I have listed this feature in 1.x. Sorry, this feature got introduced from ASP.NET 2 only. Next, security features has been enhanced using roles and memberships. Globalization and localization has been enhanced by supporting the language support of the web browser. That is, if we change the language of the web browser, then accordingly the content of the web page will also change. For example, if you change the language of the web browser as Telugu, then the content of the web page will change to Telugu. These are some of the features which are newly introduced and also updated. Next, one important point we need to remember here is mobile.NET has been removed and mobile forms has been introduced. Website publishing feature has been introduced to deploy the website using a single click. In earlier versions also we had website publishing feature, but now from ASP.NET 2 with a single click we can able to deploy our web application. If you observe the version 2 itself, it looks like a whole new product, right? Frankly, we were not expecting much from the technology, but later we got ASP.NET 3.x also. So let us understand the features of ASP.NET 3.x. And this was introduced in 2008. And remember that at this time, Microsoft was mainly concentrated on .NET Framework 3.x version. So in ASP.NET Web Application, we don't have many features, but let us observe what happened in ASP.NET 3.x. Complete .NET 3.x framework features such as WCF, which stands for Windows Communication Foundation, WF, which stands for Windows Workflow Foundation, LINQ, which stands for Language Integrated Query, etc., can be used within our ASP.NET applications. Support of what you see, what you get effect with the support of implicit CSS, where CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, got introduced. ASP.NET Ajax has been added as a part of ASP.NET. Remember that earlier ASP.NET Ajax was available as a separate product, but now from ASP.NET 3.x it is a part of ASP.NET itself. New data-bound controls are introduced in ADO.NET. And finally, mobile forms has been removed from ASP.NET. As Microsoft started understanding that it is advisable not to merge both web applications and mobile applications development together, because there is a whole lot of change that was happening in the mobile technology. And they decided to make a separate technology for developing mobile applications. Even though if you observe the number of features what we have got introduced in ASP.NET 3.x is lesser, but whatever the features we have got, they are very powerful features. Finally, the version what we are going to learn, that is features of ASP.NET 4.x, and this was initially introduced in 2010. And remember that when we say 4.x, all the above listed features will also be a part of this version 2. Okay. And when ASP.NET 4.x was introduced, once again Microsoft has concentrated a lot on ASP.NET technology and introduced many new features. One of the best feature which got introduced is URL routing, which is used to provide friendly URLs. This is very important to achieve. This is a very important feature to achieve on-page search engine optimization, popularly called as SEO. Session shrinking has been introduced. Model bindings has been introduced. Output caching has been introduced as a part of server-side caching to improve the performance of your application. Query extender is introduced to filter the data. ADO.NET entity model or framework can also be used now to interact with the database, and along with that we have a support of Signal R also. Now, when you observe our ASP.NET technology, you can notice that this technology provides a whole lot of features which will help in rapid web application development. I hope you have understood why we are going to learn ASP.NET, right? This is one technology where you have a whole lot of powerful features. Okay, please remember that next session of our ASP.NET is very important session where I will be discussing about the ASP.NET architecture and process model. And understanding that session will help you out to learn our ASP.NET much more efficiently.